So, the other day, yesterday actually, we were reading a story, and it had also been announced over the weekend. On Friday, medics announced that they would down their tools in 12 counties starting tomorrow, the 19th of April. 8 unions, including the Kenya Medical Practitioners, Pharmacists and Dentists Union, KMPDU, the Kenya National Union of Nurses, KNUN, the Kenya Union of Clinical Officers, the Kenya National Union of Pharmaceutical Technologists, the Kenya Health Professional Society, the Kenya Union of Nutritionists and Dietitians declared that their workers will not report to their workstations. In those counties, 12 counties, the workers were emphasizing that they were not necessarily planning to go on strike, but rather to demonstrate that they could not attend work due to lack of resources. Hasa sina ni bus fare, nitaingiaje kazini?
Ngumu.
Itakuwa ngumu. So you've invited the leadership of two of those unions, the Kenya Union of Clinical Officers and the Kenya Medical Practitioners and Dentists Union. Peterson Washira is the national chairman of the Union of Clinical Officers. Good morning, Peterson.
Good morning.
Welcome to Kenya's biggest conversation.
Thank you. I'm very happy to be back here. Yeah.
Karibu sana.
Asante sana.
Now, to welcome you, you heard us talking about the Proverbs. We were waiting for you to come in so that you can hear the day's proverb. This week's Proverbs are from Burkina Faso. Today's Proverb, City?
An axe does not cut the tree on its own.
An axe does not cut the tree on its own. Peterson, when you hear that proverb, how do you interpret it?
I think what that means is that though the axe is sharp and it has been made in a way that it should be able to cut, some outside forces must assist. And I think what that means in real life is that no matter how sharp or talented you may be, you require other people to help you and propel you to probably where you want to go. That would be my interpretation. Yeah.
City?
The beauty of Proverbs is that every time you ask different people, they bring to light things that you may not even have considered when you're thinking about it. But it's right. The blade of the axe is what people talk about because it's the blade that cuts. Okay? The head, as we call it. But you have to attach that head to something else. And even when you attach it, it doesn't mean it's going to cut. There has to be a force behind it that pushes it towards the intended target for cutting. So if you look at, as Wanawashira has very correctly put it, there are many forces at play.
Right.
Yes.
You can't just climb on yourself, on your own.
Hardly. Even when people talk about being self-made people, I'm not downplaying it. I'm just saying that there's a lot of effort that people make, and that effort gets you somewhere. Sure. But along the way, there are very many other people who have helped you get there.
The self is a sum of many.
Yes, it has to be.
Okay.
Yes.
Peterson, for the benefit of everybody who may not understand, what's the difference between a clinical officer and a doctor?
Wow. I think this is a question that we used to be asked like 10 years ago when many people did not understand there is a cadre called clinical officers. Though probably from where you grew up, you have actually been treated by ourselves until probably now when...
that person I was calling Daktari was actually a clinical officer.
That's a clinical officer.
Okay.
In every other outpatient in Kenya, including MTRH, the person you are going to meet first who has the capacity to diagnose you and treat you is a clinical officer. Usually you find the doctors in the inpatient, in the wards. So the difference is that we are primary physicians. We are supposed to see you first, and then the doctors are the secondary physicians, if I can put it like that. And of course, the difference is all the way from the academics, whatever we are trained in, of course, so that we are primary and doctors are secondary. But clinic officers have actually been in existence since 1928, when Kenyatta National Hospital was known as St. George. Was it?
Yes, it was.
King George. Yeah, King George Hospital.
Yes.
So when the white man started training blacks. They never believed that you can train a black to become a doctor. So they started by on-job training, and the nurses would be trained for an extra 1 year and become clinic officers to see the blacks. So later, then it moved from certificate to diploma, and now from the diploma to degree. And but now the clinical medicine now took root, and there are equivalents across the globe. Actually, the US and Europe learned from Kenya, and that is how they were able to establish the primary, the physician assistant in US. Right now they have around 600,000, and the physician associates in Europe. And we have analogs, the equivalents across the globe. We actually have an association for the analogs across the globe. Yes.
So you say even in training there's a difference?
Yeah, there is a difference between a clinical officer and a doctor.
What's the difference in terms of training?
There's
What does a clinical officer study?
Or what don't you study?
It's basically the same thing. It's only that the doctors will go for 6 years, while clinical officers go for 5 years. When it comes to surgery, the doctors are advanced than the clinical officers.
Okay.
But you also taught surgery.
We do surgery. We actually do minor and some of the invasive surgery. But now the doctors go a step ahead of the clinical officers, so that when you're primary, then they can be the secondary.
Okay.
Yes.
But let me just understand this. When people refer to health care practitioners, whether it's a clinical officer, whether it is a nurse of whatever cadre, the impression that one gets is that they are looked at as adjuncts to doctors or to, yes. Are these separate professions? Meaning, if you're a medical doctor, you're a medical doctor. If you're a clinical officer, it's a different profession. If you're a nurse, it's a different profession. Just like if you're a bus driver, it's a different profession, like that.
Precisely. In the medical field, a patient requires over 17 health professionals. And each of the profession is a standalone profession.
17?
Not dependent on the other. Yes. We have from the doctor, the clinical officer, the nurse, we have the physiotherapist, we have the laboratory officers, we have the pharmacist.
Dietitian.
All the way, dietitian, nutritionist, you have the public health officer.
Lab technician.
Up to the mortician.
Where?
Oh, yeah. That guy, also
That guy is also
part of the
he's also a healthcare provider.
death care.
They have actually started a course, I think, in MTC for morticians.
Yes, they have.
Yes.
We talked about it here, and the report was that there are more women who applied for that particular
For the job of
training.
mortician,
Yes,
or for the training
than men.
for morticians.
Yeah.
Okay. Karibu sana Peterson. Dr. Davji Atellah is the National General Secretary of the Kenya Medical Practitioners and Dentists Union. He also joins us in the conversation. Good morning, Dr. Harry.
Good morning to you.
Asante sana for joining us. Now, your two unions are among those that have said that workers in some counties across the country are going to not report to work tomorrow. Is that correct?
That's very correct.
Okay. Let's start with you, Peterson.
Very affirmative.
Which counties are these and why?
We have 12 counties. I think by today we are having 11 counties. Kisii having paid yesterday.
And I think Laikipia too.
And also Laikipia.
Murang'a and Nyeri, so we have about 8 of them.
8. And these are the counties that have not paid up to the March salary. And why we have decided this is because this is something that we have been complaining about since the inception of devolution of healthcare. And we have reached a point where we believe that it has been fashioned so. It is not by default. It is not inadvertent. It is something that have been fashioned for whichever interest. There are counties that have become notorious, some even keeping salaries for even 3 months. But almost all the counties, they do not pay deductions, the third-party deductions and other deductions on time, which of course now negatively affects our members in terms of their capacity to get the services from NHIF to be able to repay their loans. So some of them will be paid because they only pay the net and they don't pay the deductions for the loans. Then the bank is going to come for the money in your account.
So they deduct from your salary, but they don't remit to the relevant agencies.
Yes.
They don't remit to NHIF, to KRA, to your SACCOs, to bank, whether if you have a loan and such.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Peterson, you said something that's interesting. You said that they're keeping the salaries, right? So one would almost imagine that the money is available, but for some reason they do not want to pay. Dr. Davji has said that as of yesterday, 4 counties have paid. In the morning, the number was at 12. By the end of the day, the number was at 8. So it sounds as though when there is a call for the downing of tools, the money then is suddenly available. Do you smell a rat here? Is there just a lack of willingness to pay these salaries, or is there actually a cash problem?
Actually, that's why I'm saying it has been fashioned to be so. It is not that they don't have the money. If you are talking about a delay in salaries, how comes they never delayed the salaries for the civil servants at the national level? You saw the MPs complain, I think, for a day. And the next day now they were competing who has checked the account and to check whether the money is in there. So we don't believe that it's an availability of money. It is that for whichever reason, there are people who are holding this money. And even, I'm sure today you'll see some other counties paying.
Why would they want to do that, Dr. Jaffe? Why would they want to hold money that's supposed to be paying the salaries of the staff of folks who are so critical to a county? Why? Why would they want to do that?
I think it's the priority that counties have, and that is really affecting this issue of salaries. And we believe that if counties prioritize healthcare workers and healthcare in general, then the delays will not be occasioned. Because it is very difficult to understand why a county like Nakuru will be paying the workers by 22nd or 23rd of every month. Another county like Taveta will be perennially paying the month or 1 month after the other. Like also Kisumu, so like they pay February salaries in April. So I think it's the priority and a deliberate actions. And I will say one thing is that the county governments actually using the healthcare workers as the bargaining chips when they're discussing the inefficiency between them and the national government. Because then they know that when there's a shutdown in healthcare, then I think they can now bargain more. So generally, it's a deliberate thing that they are doing. And that's why we are calling that it is not proper to say that healthcare is essential and healthcare workers need to be at work, but they can't be supported and facilitated to do so. That's what made us to actually give a notice. It is not a strike notice, it's a walkout notice. And we gave the 7-day notice because it is legal. The actions that are coming in between them is the same. The only difference is that with walkouts, we don't negotiate. You just get out of work and you wait for the monies to hit your account, and your bank statements become the return to work formula that tells you there's now money, you can now go back to work.
Voila.
But then, Daktari, in all fairness, are other county workers being paid? When you say that the healthcare workers are not receiving their salary, are they the only ones?
The number of healthcare workers in the county forms about 80% of the workforce in the counties. So it then means that if there is a delay in payment of salaries in the counties, of those populations, the numbers that total to healthcare workers is around 80. So the bigger majority, and that's why the impact is big. And then they do not have any other source of income apart from going to work to these particular facilities, and because you're expected to be at work at 8 to 5 and some on call and all those durations.
They don't have another source of income.
They don't have other sources of income.
Doctors in counties don't have locum.
They don't have. There are no locums currently actually anywhere for sure. Yes.
You know, City is surprised when you say 80% of county workforce is healthcare.
Yes.
I'm talking about a little arithmetic, and I'm wondering 80%. Then I realize he's right.
Because of the hospital, all the health facilities that we see.
If you take Nduwaweru's description of the healthcare workers, there are many. There are very, 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 very many. There are very many. You look at, there is no county government unit that has many branches as the healthcare. If you look at the clinics, if you look at the different levels of healthcare facilities across the county, then you look at all the people in all those, there are many.
And by healthcare workers, we're talking about everybody who's working in a health facility.
Yes.
Including the support staff.
Yes.
There are many.
Okay. So the question is, the issue here is that counties are not able to pay salaries. They're delaying salaries for as long as 3 months.
It's not an aspect of inability. It's an aspect of the deliberate attempt not to pay, because devolution has been there for 10 years. It's just this year that we saw the parliamentarians and the senators saying that, the state officers in general, saying it's the first time since independence that they're seeing delays in salaries, and those were 3-4 days delays. But for the last 10 years in the devolution of healthcare, we've been having issues of salary delays. It has been in almost every county. We've had over 100 preventable strikes because salaries have delayed. And that's why, as unions, we sat and agreed that as much as we are calling for these salaries to be paid by 19th, in the coming months, we're going to have what we call a permanent strike notice of 5th. That means every 5th of every month, as per the Labour Relations Act, the workers need to be paid so that they can be at work. And if any county will fail to have paid by 5th, then they should not expect workers by 6th.
I'm asking us a direct question.
Yeah.
And yet you're saying, refuse or to. To the best of your understanding, you are now a national official.
Yes.
Are county governments able to pay salaries?
They're able to pay. I want to give you a practical example.
Okay.
In the year 2017, 2015 to 2017, Nakuru County had perennial salary delays. Salaries were paid, like for February, we paid in April. It was every time. But when there was a change of guard, that is in 2017, there was a new governor. There was no salary delay for the 5 years. When this new governor has come to office, there's no salary delay. So it all goes with the leadership and the governance and the deliberate will of the person in office to actually prioritize healthcare workers. And if that fails to be there, then we see the situation that we have. And this also not only goes with salaries, even the implementations of these collective bargaining agreements, promotions of healthcare workers, and even recruitments, it's also in that line. If a person who is in office has no priority to healthcare, because they don't consume it within the counties, then you realize that the operations actually are not as expected. Yes.
Let's take a break. Ndu has a question. She'll ask it after this break.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.
The conversation continues with the leadership of the Doctors' Union and the Clinical Officers' Union in the country.
One must ask, though, one must wonder, then if truly there was a cash crunch problem, as it were, because we're really trying to get to the heart of the matter here, then how is it that some 4 counties then were able to pay folks yesterday during the work day, right? And then do we get the feeling that because health workers, whether you're looking at the whole cadre from doctors down to lab technicians, across board, is it that there is a general feeling that, okay, well, these fellas have gone to school, right? But they also have a moral obligation to serve the people who may be sick. And so they will be the first ones that we can essentially throw under the bus if we have a money problem. That they may think that you're not likely to complain too much because in as much as you have professional capacity, you have a moral obligation. I'm looking for reasons as to why you would be the first ones to not be paid when there's a problem with cash flow.
I think you've put it so well on the aspect of the moral authority, and they say you have offering essential services, you've taken an oath of service. But there's a whole aspect of every person when they make these decisions or when they think in these directions of healthcare workers, they stop to think that these are human beings who actually ought to pay bills. And we've seen many incidences where because of the societal expectations of a doctor or a clinical officer or a nurse in the society, you expect it to be somebody who can't even be sick. So probably these may be making with some of the reasons that why these things happen, and that's why we have made a resolution not to keep quiet and to allow such immoral thoughts to continue, to the point that they need to know, and it needs to be known that the matters of work and that is the employees, and the matters of employer have to be resolved as per the law. And there's an Labor Act regarding that. Therefore, if you are not paid, regardless of the services you're going to offer in those hospitals, you will not have the ability. If you don't pay the rent, the landlord will not understand that you are a doctor, and therefore you don't need to pay the salaries to pay the rent. You go to petrol stations just by saying you're a doctor or a clinical officer. We will not make them fuel your car.
Fuel.
Yes, you'll have to pay. And even if you have a child and the school fees needs to be paid, you must actually have the money to pay. And therefore, if your employer does not pay you and does not consider when they will pay you, it is impossible to be at work. What you have is that skills to offer the services. So when you withhold it, then you actually enforce them to see that you are also a person that need to be treated with dignity.
Yeah, and maybe to add on to that, it's very dangerous to be treated by a frustrated and stressed worker, especially healthcare worker. And I hope that is not their perspective, because as he has said, a calling does not pay bills. So the reason as to why I'm saying it's very dangerous for a healthcare worker, you can imagine this is somebody who is supposed to have a clarity of mind so that they can listen to you, they can diagnose you. But if this person is frustrated and stressed, they are having mental issues, this person is clouded. They are going to misdiagnose you. And so it's not a problem of medics only. It's also a problem of the patient who is going to be seen. And we may be focusing probably on medics a lot, but we're also forgetting that this money is also meant to purchase consumables and equipment and other things that we use to diagnose patients and to take care of patients. Right now, in most of the counties, even those which have paid, because most of them have paid using probably overdrafts from some banks, they are not able to purchase drugs, they are not able to purchase reagents. And so anybody who is even appearing to us, you're appearing to a frustrated healthcare worker, then they are going to send you outside to a private laboratory to carry out the tests. And then once they do their prescription, you have to run to that chemist outside the hospital to purchase. And so even the cost of healthcare now goes high, because these people have to dig deep in their pockets to be able to purchase healthcare. And further, that means that those who cannot be able to afford are going to suffer from complications, compounding the whole issue. So it's a whole spectrum. And that is why I think my brother Davji is saying there is a problem with prioritization of health as an essential service. Because when we classify any sector as essential, then it means the country cannot let it even be interrupted for even an hour, because it has devastating effects. But the problem with our country is that our leadership does not seem to care if health-wise people are going to suffer, even if you are going to die, because themselves they do not consume health services from our public health system. And that is why we have been proposing that it should be in a regulation or law somewhere that once elected, you must consume health care from the public health facilities in your locality.
All state officers should consume public services.
Yes.
Matatu, public school, public hospital.
Unfortunately, we don't have a
public transport system. They use matatu until they can now see the need.
It would make perfect sense. By the way, what you're saying may sound strange, but that actually was the case. There is a time when the very same thing you're saying.
Okay.
Yes, the schools that everybody went to were public schools. The hospitals people went to were public hospitals.
Yes.
That's where you sought healthcare. So it is not something that has not been done.
Very true.
Yes.
Actually, when I was growing up, we really trusted the public healthcare system.
Yes.
That whenever you needed to go to hospital, even if you would go to a private clinic, you had to go to a public health facility so that they can confirm you actually treated right. Nowadays, it's the opposite.
It's the other way around.
We actually don't go there.
I want to ask a question to you, Dr. Davji. You said there are 8 counties that have yet to pay healthcare workers by this morning. What are these 8 counties?
We have Kisumu. We have Taita Taveta. We have Mombasa. we have Vihiga, then we have also Embu, which has not paid the statutory deduction for healthcare workers for over 1 year. So it means that even any penny that goes to the accounts of those workers are deducted by the banks or circles, anything that they have signed on. Yes.
There are more. So Kisumu, Taita Taveta, Mombasa, Vihiga, Embu, you may get the list of the others. Because I'm looking at it from this angle. So we know that governors have been saying they haven't received their revenue share from the National Treasury for the last 3 months.
Yeah.
Right? January, February, March. There are counties that are able to mobilize on-source revenue that can afford to pay salaries.
Yes.
There are counties that, are there counties, that's a question, that you think their own on-source revenue from what they've reported previously is actually insufficient to cover paying salaries?
You know, that's a good question generally, but then we want to look at it in terms of the country, in the distribution of the counties that have paid and counties that have not paid. If we, for example, look at Kisumu in terms of the on-source revenue and you compare it to Turkana that has paid, then that becomes an insolent question, because it's clearly looks at the aspect of priority, because Kisumu, in terms of its capacity and the ability to generate on-source revenue, is much higher. The same to Mombasa, for that matter. So that's why we always end up saying, what is the priority? And yesterday, when we were on TV with the governor, he says there's a budgeting process that will make on-source revenue be moved to pay the salaries. So it's an issue of there's a bureaucratic processes that are involved here for them to actually pay. So sometimes when you take these particular drastic actions against the payments, that's when they now have to sit down long hours to make sure that it's paid. Many counties will say they've gone on overdrafts and the likes, but we are saying one thing, and these are calls that we've made. It is 10 years, and some governors have been in the office for 10 years. Some have been, we've seen the first lot of governors, we're seeing new ones, and they claim and they say there's a problem from the exchequer to pay the salaries. Then why do they cling and say that they must have healthcare workers within them? They're saying that they have reached the ceiling point, the ceiling budget as per the Public Finance Act, and they cannot employ any more healthcare workers. They cannot operationalize healthcare as required. Then why do they want to stick to have these healthcare workers? Because it is like a conduit. You get money from, as per the explanation, you get money from the exchequer, put it in your account, and then transfer to the worker's account. Then what is the problem if these people are paying directly? Because the people who have made it impossible to have centralized functional health service commission or health workers is actually the governors, because they want that they claim they want the power to hire and fire. So it's more of an ego issue with them. But then why would you have that when you actually know that it's not working? And that goes to what my brother said. The problem persists because most governors have a lot of theoretical knowledge on how healthcare should work and the way they are going to change it when they're campaigning and with the manifestos. But when they come to the office, they become washimiwa, who then do not have understanding of what is happening in those facilities. They will just know that we have reached this budget, we cannot move anymore, we can't employ any more doctors, any more healthcare workers, but they don't look at it that at the service provision efficient in those facilities, because themselves they don't just consume it, their families, the MCAs, the chief officers, all of them, they got we call them high-end insurances,
Medical covers
that guarantees them to go to the best facilities in the country
or outside.
And outside the country. And since I want to tell you that Kenya has the best private care, like most the best in Africa. I think it's just second South Africa. It's better than even Egypt and all other countries. The private care. Private care. In fact, some of the conditions that are referred to India are not referred because they can't be done here. It's because the cost is high.
Let me just pause for a second, Dr.
Yeah.
When you say care,
Yes.
is it in terms of facilities we have or the human resource capacity that we have? Or is it both?
It is the investment in the private hospitals. And that's why we see that the public doesn't work. The public doesn't work because it's deliberate effort to make it not to work. It's just like what we always say, when there's a problem with water system across, then we say we have to start bottling water. When there is a problem with education, it's made to have a problem.
We have a
so that we
private
can have academies. In the same way, Vision 2030 actually policy put it there that we want to have healthcare in Kenya fully privatized by 2030. So they will make sure that there are no employment of doctors and healthcare workers in the hospitals. They'll make sure that there are no drugs, and if the 80% of the patients that go to those facilities, they get frustrated and they say, no, let's privatize this healthcare. So it is a deliberate effort to actually have that happen, because I can tell you, most of the presidents across African countries will come to private facilities in Kenya. Because the investment is higher in the private hospitals. And there's increased privatization. Yes.
And a lot of that money is coming directly from NHIF. Okay.
In fact, you put it very well. Let me tell you, the funny thing is, the government is giving private insurance 120 billion every year. And we are saying that they've funded NHIF, but these private insurances, there's none of them that is covering anybody who's going to public hospitals.
Yeah.
This money all goes to private facilities. So there's no any effect that the government will expect the public facilities to operate where there's no investment in them.
So I hear you to be saying that the government is deliberately killing its own hospitals.
Yes.
It is. And now that we are discussing challenges with finances at the county level, maybe probably we can even go broader. And what is the impact? Let's start from the point, do we actually need the National Treasury to be sending money to the counties only for the counties to pay the workers? Why not pay directly? And actually counties are suffering negatively, because like now you have to take overdrafts. You pay with interest. You don't pay KRA. Then when you're paying with interest, and NHIF and the others. So money that were meant for development in healthcare and other areas goes into interest for paying these loans.
Banks.
But if we could just be able to pay directly from the treasury, then you overcome that. And the other problem is that when health was devolved, you remember we had a protracted strike in 2013.
Yep.
And simply what we were not saying don't devolve us. We were saying, can you give us some more time? Can you develop some frameworks so that we can have effective management of human resources by the time we are devolving? Now, we devolved in a hurry. We were told the train had left. I don't know where the train was going. But we were told that the train had left and we had to go to the devolution way. And of course we had to, because it's the government. But now, we are seeing the consequences. As he is saying, there is the PFM Act. There is, I think, is it the 3565?
There's a limit.
Yes, of the recurrent.
Yep.
All the counties have reached that ceiling. And so, they will tell you that they have shortage of clinical officers, of doctors, of nurses, but they cannot be able to employ. If you look at some of our projections, like in the Ministry of Health, first in 2013, our CS of Health, CS Masharia, attended the WHO Conference of Human Resources for Health. In that conference, he said one of the biggest challenges with the healthcare in Kenya is the human resource. He signed a commitment, which is available, that from 2013 to 2017, he would employ 12,000 healthcare workers each year. Further to that, in 2014, the ministry developed a very good document called the Staffing Norms and Standards. In the Staffing Norms and Standards, it gave a projection by 2018 of the numbers we needed per each of the cadre. And for clinical officers, it is said by the year 2018, we required 16,000 in the public healthcare system for the basic services to run. Basic services. By 2018, we only had around 6,000 clinical officers. By today, we only have 8,000, against 16,000 that we were supposed to have had in 2018. And this is because after devolution, they're only given the monies for salary. Actually, mostly they are not given, but whatever goes to them is only for the salary for those who are already employed. So
Not
they
to
don't
hire
have the
more.
capacity to employ more. And now you can see the national government even had to come in and employ, like the UHC staff. We have over 9,000 staff employed by the national government sent to counties. And it's because of the problem with financing of healthcare under the counties. And there also seems to be some friction between the counties and the national government when it comes to giving finances to devolved to devolution, and I don't want to say that it seems like they are killing devolution.
Yeah, I'm saying it
But-
directly.
But
What else can you say?
but whatever they are doing,
If it walks like a duck.
they are really killing. And I can assure you, if we continue with this trajectory, in the next 5 to 10 years, the public health system will have died completely. Kenyans will either have to go to the private facilities, and if they don't have that capacity,
Mr. Weru, right now, if you look
Wachira.
Wachira.
Wachira, sorry. Why am I calling you Weru?
probably I look like Ower.
No, I know why.
You were treated by our Weru sometime.
No, I know why.
Okay.
I was thinking of care, of caring. Yes. If you look at the public healthcare system right now, how alive is it?
It's in ICU bed.
Doctor?
Yeah, I think I want to agree that I would say deliberate administrative inefficiency. You know, we may blame counties, we may blame national government, but the end result is that when you go to the hospitals, you can't get care. And the impact that we see every day. Look at the case, for example, of Mukumu girls. We have a scenario where there's an outbreak. It's an outbreak of E. coli and salmonella typhi. These are normal conditions that will be treated in a dispensary, but we see it claiming lives. We see
Dispensary.
We see dispensary. We see a lab request being sent to Kimri, and the result coming days after this particular people who samples were taken have died.
A week later.
You get the point. That
Result,
shows
yeah.
the way the healthcare is dysfunctional, actually, in entirety. It's sad for those particular families. But the reality comes in because the middle class, we feel like we have insurance covers, just like the state officers. So therefore, we do not feel like we will be going to the public facilities. But you don't know when you will land there.
Yeah.
For example, when you get an accident, when you go to Masai Mara, the first place you land in is
The
not
public
country referral hospitals. When your child is in any school, when they get issues, the first place they land to is all those particular facilities. So if the public doesn't work, we are ready to actually suffer. We'll say that if there's a break in healthcare, you must be ready to be heartbroken.
Isn't this the issue though? Because we could look at it as a money issue, but it goes a lot deeper than that. Money is the fuel for this particular engine. But we're saying right now that the engine is broke.
Yes.
And broke, I don't mean moneyless. I mean broke as in broken.
Yes.
Because you can have money, but if the structure itself is faulty, no matter how much money you pump into it, it's not going to work. The very function or the very infrastructure of the health system in the country is compromised. The question, though, is that these CBAs that have been fought, the last one, the one that we are currently in for health workers, these are some of the things that you mention. In like the current CBA is one of the things that you mention. What is it going to actually take to make it work? Because I look at Kenyatta National Hospital, the private wing is spectacular. Just as an example, that many people will be able to take their patients to the private wing at KNH, but we take issue with the public part of the same hospital. Let's not even talk about going into counties of the same hospital. So what is the problem and how can it actually be fixed?
The reality is that healthcare can never be free. And this is a fact that happens in the country if the government does not invest in healthcare by allocating the necessary budgetary allocation for it, as per their budget declaration, at least 15%, where we are about 4.4 now as a country. Then the public must pay for it. And when that happens, it means that when you go to the facilities, for example, in the KNH, private, public sides, or in the public facilities, there are some care that you will need that probably are going to cost.
Yeah.
And therefore, they will refer you to the private aspect of it, mostly the counties, because they cannot offer those services. And this is because they have not invested in them. And that's why the first thing is that if you just talk about the universal health care, as it is being said that we want every Kenyan to access health care regardless of the socioeconomic status, then the government must deliberately invest in the health care. But I can tell you that is not going to happen. It's more of a dream. If we continue empowering more of a private sector to actually
Over
grow
the
further.
public, yeah.
Because you see, one thing happens with any private sector when government funds the private sector. Because like it is now, the government is funding the private sector,
Yeah.
and the people running the private sector are the policymakers in the government.
Yep.
So it will be deliberate to have public not work. So with that case, the cost of care will always just increase. You saw yesterday in the Nation newspaper that today the cost of, for example, some of the drugs have increased 1,000-fold.
Yep.
So if you are going to get these drugs, it means you have to look how do I get funds for this? So that's the reality.
It's a very unfortunate reality, and well, let's see if these 8 counties will have paid by the end of the day. It means that the workers will report to work tomorrow. Those that haven't paid, the workers in those counties are not going to report tomorrow. That's basically the message that we are getting from you this morning.
Yes, absolutely.
Any county going forward that does not pay its workers by the 5th, on the 6th, the workers do not report.
Report to us.
Yes.
It will be working
The formula is money in your account.
Yes.
Okay. We've heard from them, the leadership of the healthcare workers. Dr. Davji Atellah is the Secretary General of the Kenya Medical Practitioners and Dentists Union. Peterson Washira is the National Chairman of the Kenya Union of Clinical Officers. Keeping here for more conversations. Good morning.